Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? We retell those moments, honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The scream hit the walls first. It tore down the staircase, bounced off the framed school photos and the old family portrait, then burst through the front door of the house on Willow Lane, as if the wood could not hold it. "Mom, what did you do?" His voice cracked on the last word. A door slammed upstairs. Heavy footsteps pounded across the floor, then thundered down the stairs. Across the street, the Vincents' porch light snapped on, flooding their front yard with pale yellow. A dog 2 houses down started barking sharp and frantic. Curtains twitched in bedroom windows along the cul-de-sac. Somewhere a late-night TV show went silent when someone grabbed a remote. I stayed where I was on the porch swing. The chains creaked with each slow sway. The cushion under me was thin and cold, the fabric worn shiny in the spots where Robert used to sit. The air smelled like wet earth and cedar. It had rained earlier, one of those steady Washington rains that soaked everything without ever quite turning into a storm. I pulled his old wool blanket tighter around my shoulders. It scratched at the back of my neck. The overhead light was off, but the street lamp at the corner caught the edge of the new deadbolt on my front door and set a dull line of gold along the metal. Inside the house, a picture frame shattered. "Helen," he yelled. "Mom!" The porch swing creaked on. Tick, creak, tick, creak. From inside, the grandfather clock in the hall chimed midnight, its deep bell pushing through the brick and siding. I felt my mouth move before I realized what I was doing. I was smiling. Not a big smile. Nothing anyone across the street could have seen. Just a small, quiet pull at one corner, tight and private and completely wrong for the sound of my grown son breaking apart in the house behind me. You might think you know what kind of woman that makes me. My name is Helen Carter. I am 72 years old. I have lived in this house outside Seattle for 39 of those years. The man whose blanket I was wrapped in was my husband, Robert. And the story that led to that scream did not start at midnight. It started 3 months earlier under a sky the color of dishwater the day we lowered my husband into the ground. The cemetery sits at the edge of Maple Ridge behind a row of Douglas firs that lean toward the town like eavesdroppers. That morning the clouds pressed low, heavy, and flat. It was not cold enough for gloves, but my fingers ached around the handle of the umbrella I was not using. We buried Robert in a narrow rectangle of earth beside a gravel path. The grass around the open grave was damp and flattened as if someone had brushed it with a wet hand. Water beaded on the big granite stones nearby and slid down the names. I wore the black dress Robert had bought for me 10 years before for his company holiday party in downtown Seattle. It had fit better then. Now the zipper dug into my ribs when I breathed too deeply. People I barely recognized formed a half circle around me in the casket. Some from his office, some neighbors, a few old church friends. They cupped styrofoam coffee cups in gloved hands and spoke in hushed, careful voices as if volume might break me. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Helen. He was a good man. Anything you need truly, you let us know, anything at all." Their hands were damp or too warm or dry as paper. I nodded when I was supposed to nod. I let them hold my elbow. I listened to the pastor talk about duty and faithfulness, about a life spent providing, about a man who always put his family first. A gust of wind carried the smell of fresh turned dirt and lilies into my face. It sat heavy in the back of my throat. Something shifted in my chest. Not sharp, not loud, just a small loosening where everything had been tight for so long that I had forgotten there was another way to feel. Relief brushed against the edges of my grief, like a draft under a closed door. I tightened my fingers around the strap of my purse until my knuckles ached. Robert would have hated that thought. I hated that thought. I folded it up quickly and shoved it into the same quiet corner where I kept all the other things I never said. When it was over, when the casket was lowered and people began to drift toward their cars, Ms. Kaplan came to find me by the gravel. She had been standing back during the service, a small woman in a dark gray coat, her silver hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. "Helen," she said, "if you feel up to it, we should go over the will soon. Not today, but soon." "Of course," I said. At home, the house swallowed me. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside was the sound, or rather the lack of it. No sports channel murmuring from the living room, no phone calls carried down the hall from the study. No drawers opening and closing upstairs as Robert changed into his evening clothes. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. We had bought that clock the year after we moved to Maple Ridge. Robert liked things that ran on gears and weight things that had rules. Every Sunday evening, he had wound it himself standing there with a little brass key, checking the level, listening to the swing of the pendulum until it was perfect. Now the tick seemed too loud. I walked through the living room past his recliner, past the remote lined up neatly on the side table. In the kitchen, the stainless steel sink gleamed. A ceramic bird sat beside it, the kind you see in gift shops, painted blue and white. Above the sink, hanging from a hook, was the old brass bird cage Robert had found at a flea market 15 years ago. It had been home to a canary for a few years until the bird died one winter. I had wanted to give the cage away. Robert said it looked nice where it was. The little door of the cage was still open. No bird, no seed. Cobweb clung to the bars like gray lace. An open cage is still a cage if you do not know how to fly. I took 2 steps toward the study, then stopped at the doorway. The room smelled like paper and dust, and the faint ghost of Robert's aftershave. His oak desk was exactly as he had left it. Bills stacked in a precise pile, manila folders labeled in his tight handwriting, a leather-bound ledger open to a page full of numbers. Over the course of 45 years, he had sat at that desk every Sunday night, paying bills, balancing accounts, checking investments. He had never shouted, never slammed a door, never called me names. He just never let me touch any of it. At first, it had felt like care. Why worry yourself, Helen? You spent all week with other people's children. Let me handle the boring stuff. After a while, I stopped asking what he was doing. Standing there in the doorway, I looked at the ledger at the envelopes with their little plastic windows and felt my stomach clench. The thought of opening even one of them made my hands prickle with sweat. 2 days after the funeral, I sat in a narrow chair in front of Ms. Kaplan's desk while she read Robert's will aloud. Her office was on the 2nd floor of a brick building downtown, above a bakery that smelled like sugar and yeast. The window behind her showed a sliver of overcast sky and the top halves of maple trees. All right, she said, scanning the page. Robert was very thorough. That sounded like him. She listed things in a calm, steady voice. The house on Willow Lane paid off to me. $180,000 in savings and insurance to be transferred to an account in my name. My teacher's pension continued as before at $2,800 a month. Numbers floated in the air between us, large and unreal like balloons too big to fit in the room. I nodded, but my brain could not quite grip them. I could see the shape of every dollar in grocery carts and roof repairs and the gas bill. I had never seen them in a bank account under my own name. There is one more section, Ms. Kaplan said. Her voice changed then just a little. It softened the way people talk when they expect something to hurt. Regarding your son Eric, she said. I looked up. If Eric Carter contests this will, or if he attempts to exert any form of control over your assets, all remaining estate funds are to be donated to Seattle Children's Hospital. The house remains with you. Your pension is excluded. Everything else transfers immediately. The words hung there too heavy to land. I blinked at her. Why would he write that? She hesitated. He did not say not in writing. He did ask a few questions about how to structure things so that you would be protected. Protected. I thought of Robert's hand over the stack of bills every Sunday, his fingers resting on the paper as if they were a shield. I see, I said. I did not really. I signed where she told me to sign. My name looked small and unsure beside Robert's confident black ink. When I stepped back out into the parking lot, the daylight was too bright. Cars moved through puddles that caught the sky and broke it into pieces. By the time I drove home, the first thin lines of rain were already starting to stitch the clouds together. The house greeted me with its usual hollow quiet. I hung my keys on the little wooden hook by the door, the one shaped like a row of tiny houses. The grandfather clock ticked in the hall. Upstairs, the floorboards were still. I made myself a cup of tea and could not taste it. That night, I lay in bed listening to the roof crack as the temperature dropped. Somewhere down the hall, the clock chimed the hours. I thought of the open birdcage in the kitchen. I thought of the thick envelope full of documents in my purse, all with my name written on them. I did not sleep much. 2 days later, the sound of a car in the driveway pulled me up from the shallow dream I had finally fallen into. The engine cut off. A door slammed. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path to the porch. The doorbell rang once, then again longer. I wiped my hands on my jeans and went to answer it. Eric stood on the porch with the gray sky behind him and 2 suitcases at his feet. His hair was longer than the last time I had seen him curling at the collar of his jacket. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red. Stubble darkened his jaw. Mom, he said. The word came out rough like he had not used it in a while. Eric, I said. For a second, we only looked at each other. I saw the little boy who used to run down the same path with his backpack half open. I saw the teenager who had slammed the door so hard the frame cracked. I saw the man who had not made it to his father's funeral. Then he stepped forward and pulled me into a hug. He smelled like cheap cologne and stale coffee. His arms were tight around me, almost too tight. "I am so sorry I did not make it to the service," he murmured into my shoulder. "Work blew up, and then Jenna kicked me out just like that. My boss was writing me. It did not make sense to stay, so I quit. It has been a mess." Words tumbled out of him, tripping over each other. Lost job, lost apartment, no savings, no one else to go to. Something inside my chest that had been hollow since the funeral filled all at once. Not with trust, not with certainty, just with the simple selfish relief of not being alone in that creaking, ticking house. "It is all right," I said. "You can stay here." His shoulders sagged. "As long as you need," I added. He leaned back and smiled, the tired lines in his face smoothing out a little. "I will take care of you, Mom," he said, his voice soft and earnest. "I promise." Behind him over his shoulder, I could see the front door standing open. The new deadbolt gleamed in the gray light. Beyond that, the narrow hallway stretched back into the house toward the ticking clock and the hanging bird cage. I stepped aside to let him in. For the first time since Robert died, the house did not feel empty. It felt smaller. For a little while, having Eric in the house felt almost normal. He carried his suitcases upstairs, claimed the old guest room at the back of the hall, and by the second day, his things had spread out in quiet ways. A charger left trailing from an outlet in the kitchen, a pair of running shoes beside the front door, an unfamiliar jacket tossed over the back of a chair. In the mornings, I heard the shower run later than I was used to. Robert had always gotten up before 6, the pipes rattling, while it was still dark. Eric did not appear until 8 or sometimes closer to 9. Hair-damp eyelids, puffy, the smell of some harsh body spray following him down the stairs. He would drop into Robert's old recliner with a mug of coffee and the television remote in his hand, flipping channels until he found the news or a game show. The sound filled the living room in a way that made the house feel less like a museum. On the 6th day after he arrived, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes in front of me, trying to work up the courage to open the first one. The light outside was gray. Rain tapped at the window above the sink. Eric leaned against the doorway, watching me. "Everything all right?" he asked. I pressed my thumb along the edge of the nearest envelope, feeling the ridge of the glued flap. "Bills," I said. "I should go through them." He made a little face, half sympathy, half disgust. "Let me guess, electric, gas, all that fun stuff." "Yes." He stepped into the kitchen and pulled out a chair. "Actually, I was coming to talk to you about something. But this works." My fingers stilled. "About what?" He smoothed a non-existent wrinkle on the tablecloth, then looked up at me with a careful expression. "I have an interview," he said. "Downtown. Accounting firm, big office views of the water. It could be a really good step." "That is wonderful," I said more quickly than I meant to. Relief rose in me like warm air. A job meant a path for him that did not begin and end at my front door. "Yeah," he said, and his mouth curved. "Thing is, I cannot show up looking like I slept in my car, you know. First impressions." He tugged at the collar of his flannel shirt. The cuffs were frayed. I had seen that shirt in old photographs of him and Jenna at barbecues. "I need a proper suit," he went on. "Something that says I belong there. A good one will run about 1,000. The number hit the table between us. My first instinct was to flinch. 1,000 was not a figure I had ever connected to clothing. Then another thought followed close behind. The savings account Ms. Kaplan had described sitting somewhere with more zeros than I had seen in my name before. "What I have now," he said, "it would send the wrong message. I would not ask if it did not matter." He waited. I pictured the ledger in Robert's study, the tidy columns of numbers. He would have talked about budgets and depreciation. He would have made a chart. What would Robert say, I thought for a moment. Then quietly I corrected it. "What do I say?" I took a breath. "All right," I said. "If it helps you get the job, we can do that." Eric exhaled relief, loosening his shoulders. "You are the best, Mom," he said. He came around the table and kissed the top of my head in a quick, boyish gesture. "I promise as soon as I'm on my feet, I will pay you back." I wrote out the check with slow, careful strokes. The ink looked too dark against the paper. 3 days later, it was the car. He found me in the living room, a folded sheet of paper in his hand. "Transmission," he said, shaking his head. "Mechanic says it needs work. If I ignore it, the whole thing could fail. 1,500, maybe a bit more. I know it is bad timing." He laughed once without humor. "With the interview and all, I cannot exactly take the bus." I knotted my throat tight. The car was his lifeline. Without it, the job would be impossible. That was how he framed it, and I accepted the frame. "All right," I said again. Then it was an old credit card. an account from his 20s that had been haunting him in his words. He wanted a clean slate, a fresh start. Every time there was a reason that felt just close enough to right. I told myself this was what parents did even when the child was almost 40. I told myself I had the money now and it was not as if I needed much. I lived alone, my days were small. At night, though, I would lie in bed and see numbers inside my closed eyes. The savings shrinking, the monthly pension moving not only into my account, but out of it again. Thin streams feeding something I could not quite see. The first time it happened with the stove, Eric did not raise his voice. It was a Tuesday. The rain had slowed to a mist. I was on the couch with a book open in my lap, though I had been staring at the same sentence for several minutes. He walked in from the kitchen, his brow furrowed. "Mom," he said, "did you mean to leave the burner on?" I looked up. "The stove?" I asked. "Yeah, I just walked in there." Flame going, no pot, no pan, nothing. If there had been a dish towel nearby or some oil on the stove, we would have had a real problem. My stomach tightened. "I do not think I used it," I said, "not since lunch." "Well, it is on now." He held out his hand. "Come see." In the kitchen, the smell of gas made the back of my tongue taste metallic. One of the front burners was lit a low blue ring under an empty grate. The kettle sat cold on the counter. I tried to remember. Had I heated water for tea and forgotten to turn it off? Had I begun and been distracted? The day had slipped through my fingers in a way I could not quite track. Breakfast dishes, a load of laundry, the afternoon news. There were blanks I did not like to look at. Eric reached over and turned the knob. The flame vanished with a soft sigh. "Look," he said gently, "I am not mad. I just got in and saw it, and I thought, what if I had gone to the gym first? What if you had gone out back and forgotten? Things happen." He rested his hand on my shoulder for a moment. "You are 72, he said. "You have a lot on your mind. Memory slips are normal at your age. That is why I'm here, to keep an eye on things, to keep you safe." He smiled as if he had given me a gift. I nodded, though the word safe sounded different in my ears. It did not feel like a blanket. It felt like a boundary. 2 mornings later, he found the front door. I came into the kitchen to make coffee and found him at the table, his jaw set. "Do you remember locking up last night?" he asked. "Yes," I said at once. Because the door was wide open when I came down. Not just unlocked. Open. The image made my chest clench. In my mind, I saw the rectangle of darkness where the door should be, anyone at all able to step through. I checked it, I insisted, hearing the edge of panic in my own voice. "I know I did." I rattled the deadbolt. "I am telling you what I found," he said. He did not sound angry. He sounded patient the way I had once sounded with first graders who swore they had turned in a homework assignment that was nowhere to be seen. He reached out, palm up. "Sit down," he said, "please." I did. The chair felt hard. "You have had a lot thrown at you," he went on. "Dad passing all this paperwork, the money stuff. It is a lot. Your brain is juggling more than it should. Forgetting a lock is exactly the kind of thing that can happen." "I do not want to forget that," I said quietly. "I know," he said. "So we will figure it out, together. That is what family does." The words should have soothed me. Instead, they pressed down on something inside me that was struggling to lift its head. The pattern spread from there. A lamp left on in the den. My reading glasses in the bathroom instead of by the bed. The mail sitting on the wrong table. Little things. Each time Eric would bring it to my attention with that same expression of concerned kindness. "You are always the organized one," he would say. "To see you like this, it scares me. But we can manage it, as long as I'm here." Each time it happened, my certainty thinned a little more. I began to doubt not what he said, but what I remembered. I would catch myself standing in the hallway, hand on the doorknob, trying to recall if I had just locked it or only thought about locking it. One afternoon, the pile of bills in the study grew so large that I could not ignore it. Window light lay pale on Robert's desk. The bird cage over the sink down the hall cast a broken shadow against the kitchen wall. I sat in Robert's chair for the first time since the funeral. The leather squeaked under my weight. The keyboard pushed back neatly beside the ledger waited. "Helen," Eric called from the doorway. I turned. He stood there with his arms folded across his chest, his eyes on the envelopes. "You do not have to fight with those," he said. "There is an easier way." "I should learn how to do it," I said. I never did. His mouth tipped in a half smile. "I know. That is kind of the problem." He stepped into the room. "Look, I have been thinking. There is a simple solution. We can put something in place that takes the pressure off you. No more worrying about due dates, no more late fees because you forgot to mail a check. I have never forgotten to pay a bill, I said a little too sharply. The words surprised me. They sounded childish almost. Maybe not in the past, he said. But things are changing, Mom. You left the stove on. You left the door open. You are the one who told me you feel shaky when you look at this stuff. I swallowed. My mouth was dry. What solution? I asked. He pulled a folder from under his arm and set it on the desk. A power of attorney, he said. Just for finances. It lets me handle the money side of things for you. Pay the mortgage, the utilities, property taxes, all of that. I am already helping with so much informally. This just makes it official. Then if something happens, there is no scramble. No risk of you missing something important. He said the word mortgage even though the house was paid off. The word still had weight for me. It carried images of banks taking houses away, of moving boxes stacked on a lawn. I do not know, I said. He sighed softly as if disappointed but not surprised. Come on, Mom. You know how many stories there are about older people getting taken advantage of because they do not have anyone watching out for them. At least you have me. He flipped the folder open, typed pages, neat headings, blank lines, waiting for a signature. We can go to the bank, he said. They will explain. You will see it is all above board, and you can revoke it any time you want. I looked down at the papers. The words were a blur of terms I did not use: fiduciary agent authority. Eric placed his hand lightly on the back of my chair. Let me help you, he said in a low voice. Please. The next day, we sat in a glass cubicle inside the bank on Main Street with a young woman in a navy blazer and a name badge that said Rodriguez. She pointed to lines on forms to small paragraphs in dense print. All this, as she said, is give your son the authority to manage your existing accounts. Pay bills, move funds between checking and savings, that sort of thing. Many of our older clients find it useful to have a trusted family member listed. As I mentioned, you can revoke it at any time provided you are still competent to make your own decisions. Competent. The words sat on the table between us like another document. I glanced at Eric. He smiled, reassuring, his shoulders relaxed. To Ms. Rodriguez, he looked like any other concerned adult child doing the responsible thing. I thought about the stove, the door, the way my own brain had begun to feel like a room with the furniture moved overnight. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. The signature line weighted a thin blue invitation. I wrote my name. Once after Robert's death, that name on paper had seemed like the beginning of something. Ownership. Autonomy. Here in the cool air of the bank, with the clock on the wall ticking and the faint hiss of the heating vents in my ears, it felt smaller again. Excellent, Ms. Rodriguez said. We will get this scanned and added to your profile right away. Eric squeezed my shoulder. You will not regret this, he said. The change began 3 days later. He came into the kitchen with a stack of printed pages and set them on the table in front of me as I was rinsing out my teacup. I went through your accounts, he said, just to see where we are. I think we should simplify things. I dried my hands on a dish towel and sat down. What do you mean? I asked. I linked your pension deposit to my checking, he said. From there, I set up automatic payments for the utilities, the property tax, your insurance. That way, nothing gets missed. No late fees, no shut-off notices, no surprises. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. This is for you, he said. Inside were 5 crisp $20 bills and 3 more. 400. Then another bill tucked behind making 5. 500 a month, he said. You're spending money. For coffee with Marianne, books, little things. Fun stuff. I will take care of the rest. I stared at the cash. Spending money, I repeated. Yeah, he said as if it were obvious. You are retired. You should not have to think about anything bigger than that. You told me yourself all this number work makes you anxious. I thought of the years with Robert, the way he had handed me an envelope each month with money for groceries and gas, and what he called incidentals. He had used a different word, allowance. The taste of that word rose up now uninvited. That is my pension, I said. It is supposed to cover my life, not just coffee. And it is, he said easily. I am using it for exactly that. Keeping a roof over your head, making sure the heat works, that the house is insured. You want those things, do you not? The way he said it, the answer embedded in the question, made arguing feel petty. I do, I said. Then let me worry about the boring parts. He smiled. You earned that check by taking care of other people's kids for 33 years. Now I get to take care of you. Come on, Mom. Let me do something right. You? He pushed the envelope closer to me, the corner of it, nudging my fingers. When I went to make coffee the next morning, the grinder was gone from the counter. In its place sat a large plastic container of pre-ground beans from a discount brand, the label bright and cheerful. We needed to cut back a bit, Eric said when I asked. The fancy stuff adds up. Trust me, this tastes almost the same. It did not. It was thin and bitter with a faint burnt note. I drank it anyway. A week later, I stood in front of the thermostat in the hall, pressing the little arrows, the way I had seen Robert do 100 times. The house felt cold. My fingers were stiff. The screen lit up, but nothing changed. When I pressed again, the display beeped in protest. A new plastic cover had been screwed over the controls. A tiny keyhole gleamed on the side. Lowering the temperature a couple of degrees saves a lot on the heating bill, Eric said when he found me there. You are always talking about wasting money. This helps. Put on a sweater. You have that big blue one of Dad's. His tone was light, almost playful, as if we were sharing a joke. That afternoon, the grocery bags he brought in were filled with generic labels I did not recognize. The brands I had bought for years were gone, replaced by cheaper versions in thinner packaging. The phone rang the next Tuesday, right on the edge of afternoon. The sound reached me in the living room. Old habit moved me toward it, but I heard Eric's footsteps hit the tile in the kitchen first. Hello, he said, Carter residence. I paused in the doorway, half hidden by the wall. His back was to me. Oh, hey, Marianne, he said. Yeah, she is here. I took another step, ready to call out to say I would be right there. Eric glanced over his shoulder, saw me, and lifted a finger to his lips. She's napping, he said into the phone. She's been really forgetful lately. The doctor wants her to avoid too much stimulation. It wears her out. My mouth opened, but no words came. Well, you know, Mom, he said, a little laugh in his voice. She does not want anyone to worry. I will tell her you called. He hung up, still smiling faintly, and turned to me. That was Marianne, he said. She sends her love. I could have talked to her, I said. I am not napping. You look tired, he said. Besides, she will call again. You know she will. Sit down. I will make you some tea. The kettle howled on the stove. The bird cage over the sink hung in its usual place, door open, empty. From the hall, the grandfather clock ticked on. In my own house with my son under my roof, I realized there were entire conversations happening around me that I was not part of. Decisions being made with my name on them in rooms where I did not sit. Some nights when the television in Eric's room hummed through the ceiling and the clock in the hall marked off another set of seconds, I lay awake staring at the shadowed square of my bedroom door. The locks were all in place. I was still not sure which side of them I stood on. The house was quiet when it happened. Eric left a little before 10 that morning. He stomped around upstairs for a while, drawers opening and closing closet door, bumping the wall. Then he came down in one of his new shirts, crisp and pale blue, the fabric still holding the folds from the store. I am meeting a guy about a job, he called from the hall. Networking. Couple of hours. He jingled his keys as if to prove it. All right, I said from the kitchen. The front door clicked shut behind him. His car backed out, gravel crunching under the tires, and then the sound faded down Willow Lane. For a few minutes I stood at the sink, watching the empty space where his truck had been. The maple trees across the street were shifting in a breeze that did not quite reach the porch. Clouds moved over the sun, turning the light in the kitchen flat. I washed my mug, I wiped the counter, I listened to the refrigerator, the clock, the distant whine of a leaf blower 3 houses down. When I turned toward the dining room, I saw it. Eric's silver laptop sat open on the table, its screen still bright. He never left it open. Usually he snapped it shut, slid it into his bag, took it away with him like a part of his body. For a few seconds I stood in the doorway, palms damp. That is as I thought. Then another thought pressed in. It is mine too. I walked to the table. The banking site filled the screen, all clear lines and company blue. My name was at the top of the page. The cursor blinked beside a row of numbers that had already stopped moving. Transfer complete, the text said. From Helen Carter Savings. To Eric Carter Checking. Amount 60,000 Ho USD. The zeros swam. My hand shot out to grip the back of the nearest chair. The wood felt slick under my fingers. I read the line again, then a third time, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something smaller. 60,000. Robert's voice rose inside my head, cool and practical. He would have said the number out loud, broken it down, talked about compound interest over decades. He would have drawn a graph to show what happened when you took that much out of a retirement plan. My mind did none of that. It skipped straight past logic to a single blunt fact. The account that had once held 180,000 now held less than half of that, and whatever was left, I had not chosen to move. The air in the room felt thinner. I should have closed the computer, I knew that. It was what a polite person, a trustful person would do, a good mother. I should have snapped the lid down and walked out of the room and asked him later calmly what the transfer was for. My hand reached for the trackpad instead. The pointer slid up the screen. I clicked on the little icon of 3 lines in the corner. A menu dropped offering history. I tapped it before I could talk myself out of it. A list unfurled down the left side of the screen. Recent pages. The most recent were from the bank. Beneath those sat row after row of links. Luxury apartments, Seattle waterfront. Lease agreement draft. Down payment confirmation. I clicked. A website filled with photographs opened over the banking page. Glass towers against bright blue sky. Sunlight glinting on balconies that faced Elliott Bay. An infinity pool on a rooftop. In the corner, a logo in elegant font. Astral Residences. Below that, a page titled Lease Summary, Monthly Rent, Square Footage, Parking Fee, and in a neat digital form near the bottom, a section marked Initial Payment, Amount Received 60,000 tasting ticks. My mouth tasted like copper. I went back. BestBuy.com, the next link said. Then a string of numbers. When I opened it, there was the confirmation screen for an $8,000 television, its screen so large it seemed to spill out of the picture. A sound system with more speakers than we had rooms. A leather sofa in a gray that matched the clouds over Maple Ridge. A list of receipts followed. Designer clothing brands I had only seen in magazines. A watch with a small write-up about heritage and precision. A gaming console. Delivery confirmations. Further down the list, restaurant names. Orchid Room. The Harbor Table. Little notes beside each line where he had typed in a comment. Client dinner, networking, justified with a word. I scrolled until my eyes blurred. The numbers next to each entry were not the largest I had ever seen, not by themselves. 300, 400, 720, but they stacked one on top of the other climbing. The house around me pressed closer. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked at its usual pace, but each sound landed heavier than the one before, as if the pendulum were dragging a weight. At the edge of my vision, past the open archway, I could see the bird cage above the kitchen sink. Dust lay in the curves of its bars. I sat. The chair caught me before my knees gave out. My hand left a damp print on the dark wood. I should have felt anger. It seemed like the correct response. The words theft and betrayal slid past the shape of them familiar. I had read enough books, seen enough movies to know how a person was supposed to react when they discovered that someone close had taken what did not belong to them. All I felt at first was cold. It started in my chest and went out into my arms, into my fingers on the edge of the table. My thoughts narrowed until there was room for only one of them at a time, each time the same one. What if he leaves? It came with an image. The house as it had been in the first days after Robert's funeral. The empty recliner. The silent television. The chair across the table with no one in it. The upstairs rooms with no footsteps overhead. I tried to push that thought away and focus on the numbers, on the fact that the money Robert had left the money I had earned had been poured into a life I had not seen. A condo downtown? Meals in places where I had never eaten. Objects that were not in this house because they were already decorating another. My mind slid back to Eric's face when he talked about the job, the way his shoulders had slouched when he told me about losing his apartment, the way he had hugged me when he arrived on the porch smelling like coffee and exhaustion. How would I confront him, I wondered, pressing my palms together? How would I say the words out loud? If I did. If I accused him, if I laid the printed pages down in front of him and said, "This is what you did, what then?" He could deny it. He could shout. He could turn it around and say I had spied on him. He could pick up his keys and walk out the door and not come back. I sat very still listening to the clock, listening to my own breathing, and realized I was more afraid of the sound of his car leaving the driveway for the last time than I was of any number on the screen. After a while, I closed the laptop with more care than it deserved. The sound of it shutting was soft, polite. I wiped my fingertips on the side of my cardigan as if the information on the screen had left a residue on my skin. Then I carried the laptop back to where he usually kept it on the hutch, set it at the angle I thought it had been at before, and left the room. The days that followed went gray. I moved through them the way I had been moving through the house, in small, careful paths that did not touch certain corners. Eric came and went talking about interviews, about possibilities, about people he had met. He showed me the cuff of a new jacket, tugged at the sleeve of a blazer, laughed about how much better he looked than the other candidates in their off-the-rack suits. I made sounds at the right moments. I let his words wash over me. In my head, the number stayed. 60,000. It beat under everything a hidden pulse. On Thursday, he tossed a $20 bill onto the kitchen counter on his way out. "We are out of milk," he said, "and dish soap. Can you grab some?" The cheaper brand is fine. I have a meeting. I picked up the bill, folded it once, and slid it into the pocket of my coat. The walk to the grocery store took 15 minutes. The sidewalk glistened from a rain that had only just ended. Cars slid past on their way to somewhere else. My breath fogged the air in front of me. Inside, the lights were a harsh, clean white. The music overhead tinny and cheerful. I found the cleaning aisle and stood in front of rows of bright plastic bottles, comparing prices, turning labels to look for numbers on the back. My fingers were stiff around the neck of a cheap brand of dish soap when someone said my name. Helen. I turned. Marianne stood at the end of the aisle, a shopping basket hooked in the crook of her elbow. Her dark hair pulled up into a loose knot. She wore a green scarf I recognized from winter concerts at the school. Fine lines fanned from the corners of her eyes, but they deepened now with something like shock. "Oh my God," she said. "Helen." Her basket hit the floor with a small thud. She closed the distance between us quickly, her hand already reaching for my arm. "You look like you have seen a ghost," she said, "or become one." I tried to laugh. It came out thin. "I am fine," I said. "Just running errands." She looked at the bottle in my hand, at my coat, at the way I was standing there with my shoulders slightly hunched as if I were bracing for something to fall. "When I called, she said Eric said you were napping, that you were confused, that the doctor told you to rest." Heat rushed to my face. He should not have said that, I murmured. I was just tired. "Have you seen a doctor?" she asked. "Did he go with you?" I stared at the row of soap. "No," I said. She took the bottle from my fingers and set it back on the shelf. "Come on," she said. "You are shaking." "I am not," I said automatically, then realized I was. She put her arm around my shoulders. "There is a cafe in the corner," she said. "We are going to sit down. You can tell me what is going on, start to finish." The cafe was nothing more than a few plastic tables near the front windows, but someone had tried to make it welcoming. There were fake plants in metal buckets and a chalkboard menu with messy handwriting. The coffee was weak and tasted faintly of cardboard, but it was hot. Marianne set a paper cup in front of me and sat down opposite, her eyes never leaving my face. "All right," she said, "tell me." The words stuck at first. I took a sip of coffee. I folded and unfolded the napkin. I watched people push carts past us, their wheels rattling over a crack in the tile. "I do not know where to start," I said. "Start with Eric," she said. "He is living with you now, right?" "Yes," I said. "He came after the funeral. He had some trouble with his job and with Jenna. I told him he could stay as long as he needed." So I told her. Not everything at once. It came in pieces like beads slipping off a string. The suit, the car, the credit card. The way I had signed the power of attorney, my hand shaking in the cool, bright bank. The envelope of cash he handed me every month and called my spending money. I heard my own voice try to soften it to make Eric sound reasonable. "He says it is just easier," I told her. "He is better with numbers than I am. You know how I get with forms." Marianne listened without interrupting. Her jaw clenched once when I told her about the thermostat cover, but she did not speak. I described the stove, the door, the way my glasses kept turning up in odd places, the phone call she had not been allowed to have. "He told you I was confused," I said. "He says it is normal, that it is my age. He is worried about me." I saved the laptop for last. By the time I got to the transfer to the condo downtown and the receipts for things that did not exist anywhere in my house, my throat was raw. I forced the numbers out anyway because leaving them unsaid gave them even more power. When I finished, the room felt smaller. Marianne's hands were clenched around her coffee cup so tightly the lid had buckled. "This is not worry," she said quietly. I stared at her. "This is abuse," she said, "financial abuse. This is theft, Helen." "No," I said, the word coming out before I could think it through. "He is my son. He is just careless." She looked at me, really looked in the way only someone who has known you in 3 different decades can. "If a student came to you and told you this story about a caregiver," she said, "would you call it carelessness?" I opened my mouth and closed it again. "He is all I have," I whispered. Her expression softened, but her voice did not. "He is not all you have," she said. "You have a house that is in your name. You have a pension. You have friends. You have me. You are not a lone old woman in a cabin in the woods. You are a retired teacher in Maple Ridge with options." I stared down at the table. A coffee ring had formed where my cup had sat. "I do not know what to do," I said. "You talk to someone who does," she said. "A lawyer who knows this kind of thing. There is a man in town, Daniel Sullivan, elder law." I took my aunt to him when her nephew started helping himself to her checks. "He is good." I flinched at the word nephew. "I cannot drag my son into court," I said. "I cannot have him arrested. He will never forgive me." Marianne leaned forward. Right now, she said he is not afraid of losing you. He is not even afraid of losing your trust. The only thing he is afraid of losing is access to your money. That is what he is protecting, not you. A tear slipped down my cheek. I brushed it away with the side of my hand. I feel so foolish, I said. You are not, she said. You are tired. You are grieving. And you are being manipulated by someone who knows exactly where your soft spots are. She pulled her phone from her bag and unlocked it. I am calling Sullivan's office, she said. You can say no. You can sit there and shake your head. I am still calling. You can decide after you meet him, but you are not going back into that house pretending this is nothing. A part of me wanted to snatch the phone away. Another part, smaller but suddenly clearer, stayed where it was. When she hung up, she had an appointment. That afternoon, a gap in his schedule. I will drive, she said. You just bring yourself. The law office of Daniel Sullivan was on the second floor of a narrow building above a dry cleaner and a nail salon. The hallway outside smelled faintly of chemicals and something fried. Inside his door, the air shifted to paper and coffee. He greeted us himself, a tall man with thinning hair and gentle eyes. He wore a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. Mrs. Carter, he said, shaking my hand. Come in, please sit. His office had mismatched chairs and a ficus tree leaning toward the light of a single large window. Case files were stacked in tidy piles on a side table. A framed photograph of a woman and two teenagers stood on his desk. Marianne sat beside me. I could feel her presence like a steadying hand, but she did not speak for me. Daniel asked me to tell him what had been happening, so I did. I heard myself shorten some parts, just as I had with Marianne, but he was patient. He asked for dates when I could remember them for amounts for the names of accounts. He wrote in a yellow legal pad in a looping script as I talked. When I finished, he set his pen down and rested his forearms on the desk. All right, he said. This is important. Nothing you have described is a misunderstanding. This is a pattern. Your son is exerting control over you and your assets. That is called financial exploitation of an elder. In this state, it is a crime. The word crime sank into my skin. Does that mean they will put him in prison? I asked, my voice thin. It means he said that you have rights. You retain the right to revoke that power of attorney. You retain the right to move your money to close accounts to decide who can and cannot touch it. And you have the right to ask for help from the authorities if you want it. I twisted my hands together in my lap. If I do this, I said, he will hate me. If you do nothing, he said, what happens next? I thought about the condo, the receipts, the way my savings had shrunk in a matter of weeks. I do not know, I said. He nodded. You do not have to decide everything today, he said. What I can do is explain your options. He talked about revoking the power of attorney, about going to the bank with a paralegal from his office, Naomi, who could make sure the right forms were filed. He mentioned the possibility of opening new accounts somewhere Eric did not know. He described an affidavit, a report to the police, and the choice to file it now or hold it. Marianne sat very still beside me. When he finished, I looked at my hands. I'm not sure I'm strong enough for this, I said. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Strength is not a feeling, he said. It is just what you do next when you are scared. The sentence sat between us. I thought of the birdcage in my kitchen hanging where Robert had left it. The door had been open for years. The only thing that kept it empty was the fact that there was no bird. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course, he said. Take a day. Take 2. If you choose to move forward, call my office. Ask for Naomi. She will set up the bank visits and prepare the paperwork. If you choose not to, that is your choice. No one can make it for you. On the drive home, the sky over Maple Ridge had shifted to a deeper gray. Rain gathered on the windshield. Marianne's hands were steady on the wheel. You do not have to come over, I said when she pulled into my driveway. I will be all right. She turned off the engine and looked at me. You call me, she said, whatever you decide. Inside the house smelled like coffee and the faint remains of whatever Eric had eaten for lunch. A pan sat in the sink unwashed. The television in the living room was off. I stood in the hallway and listened. The clock ticked. The floorboards were quiet. That evening, after the local news, I found Eric in the living room. He sat in the recliner, his feet on the ottoman, his headphones around his neck. The television played a muted commercial. The choir at church is putting on a spring concert, I said, standing in the doorway. He did not look up. That is nice, he said. I was thinking about getting a new dress I went on. There is one I saw at Macy's last week, navy, on sale, $150. He glanced at me, then eyes moving from my face to the cardigan I wore, the one that had been Robert's. A dress, he said. Yes, I said. It has been a long time since I bought something like that. He laughed, a short, sharp sound. Mom, you are 72, he said. What are you trying to prove? We cannot throw money at things like that right now. Be sensible. The word landed in my chest. I looked at the headphones on his shoulders. I remembered the receipt for them on his laptop screen, the neat digital line next to the price. $600. My slippers were thinning at the toes. I curled my feet under the chair to hide the worn patches on the soles. The urge to apologize rose in me familiar, for asking, for wanting. This time something else rose with it. It was not loud. It was not hot. It was a quiet, solid thing, like a stone at the bottom of a river. The sense that a line had been crossed somewhere without my consent. You are right, I said. He relaxed, already turning back toward the television. Very sensible, I added. In my ears, my own voice sounded different. He did not notice. He slid the headphones up over his ears and closed his eyes, shutting me out with the touch of a button. In the hall, the grandfather clock ticked on. I stood there for a long moment, hand resting lightly on the back of the chair, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Then I turned and walked to the kitchen. The birdcage swung slightly in a draft from the window. Its little doors always stood open. I made the call in the bathroom because it was the only room with a lock. Morning light filtered through the frosted window, turning the walls a dull silver. I turned on the faucet in the sink and let the water run so the sound would cover my voice if Eric walked past the door. My hands looked old against the blue plastic of my phone. The skin on the backs of them was thin enough that I could see the veins. I scrolled to Daniel Sullivan's number and pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Sullivan Law Office, this is Daniel. It is Helen, I said. My voice sounded calm, almost clipped. I watched my reflection in the mirror as I spoke. Helen Carter. There was the slightest pause. Mrs. Carter, he said, how are you doing today? I am ready, I said, for the things we talked about, the banking, the revocation. The word caught a little in my mouth. I made myself finish it. He did not hesitate. I will have Naomi meet you at your bank, he said. Can you be there in an hour? Yes, I said. We will start with revoking the power of attorney, he went on. Naomi will bring the forms. From there, you can decide what you want to do with your funds. I will alert her now. Thank you, I said. I hung up and closed my eyes for a moment. The water in the sink ran on, splashing against porcelain. When I opened my eyes, I did not look away from the woman in the mirror. Her shoulders were not as straight as they had been at 30 or even 50, but for the first time in a long time, she looked like the one in charge of the body she stood in. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and opened the door. Eric was in the kitchen making himself eggs. The smell of cooking oil hung in the air, heavy and slightly burnt. Music played low from his phone, something with a beat I did not recognize. I am going out, I said. He cracked another egg into the pan. Where to, he asked. The bank, I said. I need to ask them a question about my account. He slid the egg around the pan with a spatula, watching the whites set. You want me to come, he said. I can clear it up faster. No, I said. I will manage. He shrugged. Suit yourself. I took my coat from the hook and my keys from the little house-shaped rack. For a second, my hand brushed his keys hanging beside mine. The two sets touched and chimed softly together. Outside, the air was crisp. The sky was a pale, thin blue with high clouds nailed to it. I locked the door carefully behind me and checked it twice. Naomi was waiting for me just inside the glass doors of the bank. She was younger than I had expected, no more than late 20s, with dark hair pulled into a neat ponytail and a canvas bag over one shoulder. She wore a navy blazer and carried a folder in both hands. Mrs. Carter, she said. I am Naomi Park. Mr. Sullivan filled me in on the basics. We can talk details inside. We sat in a small office with frosted windows and a plant that looked more plastic than alive. A wall clock ticked above the desk, out of rhythm with the one in my hallway at home. Naomi laid the folder on the desk and opened it. This is the revocation of the power of attorney form, she said. It states that as of today, your son no longer has authority to act for you on your accounts. Once it is signed and notarized, the bank will remove his access. The paper was 3 pages full of tight type and a few blank spaces. Naomi pointed to the bottom of the last page. This is where you sign, she said. I will sign as a witness. Then we take it to the notary. Do you have any questions before we do that? My fingers rested on the edge of the paper. Once I sign, I asked, he cannot move money around anymore. Not from these accounts. Correct, she said. He will not be able to log in, withdraw, transfer, or request changes. The bank will treat him as a stranger in terms of authority. A stranger. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled for a moment, then steadied. I wrote my name the way I had written it 1,000 times before. The letters came out stronger than I felt. Naomi signed next, her script looping across the page. We took the papers down the hall to another desk, where a woman with a stamp and tired eyes checked my driver's license and pressed a raised seal into the corner of the document. "That is it," Naomi said when we returned to the little office. "Your son no longer has control here." The relief was not a rush. It was more like a very small door opening somewhere inside my ribs. From the bank, we drove across town to a different branch of a different institution. The sign outside said Evergreen Community Credit Union. I had never been inside. "This is where you can start fresh," Naomi said as we stepped through the automatic doors. "New accounts, new numbers, new logins. You can choose who knows about them." A woman at a desk by the window introduced herself as Carla and asked for my ID. She typed my information into her computer, fingers flying over the keys. "All right, Mrs. Carter," she said. "We can set you up with a checking and a savings today. Would you like to transfer funds from your existing bank?" "Yes," I said. Naomi unfolded another sheet of paper, this one authorizing a transfer. "We have already confirmed the balance," she said quietly, more to me than to Carla. "After the $60,000 and the other withdrawals, you have $90,000 left in that savings account." The number hurt and comforted at the same time. It hurt because I knew what it had been before. It comforted because there was still enough to matter. I signed. Carla clicked her mouse. On her screen, tiny numbers moved in silent columns. "There," she said. "The funds will be here by the end of the day at the latest, likely sooner." She handed me a small folder with my account information inside. At the front was a temporary debit card, my name printed in raised letters. The plastic was warm from her hand. I ran my thumb over the letters, Alien Carter. No one else's name, no joint, no so sign. Mine. When Naomi dropped me back at my house, it was just past noon. Eric's truck sat in the driveway, now dust on his windshield. The curtains in the front window were half drawn. "Do you want me to come in with you?" Naomi asked. "No," I said, "not yet. I have something else I need to do first." She nodded. "Call me when you are ready to move on the next part," she said, "and call me if you feel unsafe at any point. We will work around whatever you need." Inside, the house smelled faintly of microwaved leftovers and the citrus cleaner I used on the kitchen counters. The television was off. Eric was not in the living room. I stood still for a moment, listening. The bedroom door at the top of the stairs was closed. I went up quietly and stopped outside the guest room. The door was not locked. I turned the knob and went in. His room looked like a catalog page in the process of being flipped. New clothes lay draped over the back of a chair, tags still attached to some of them. A pair of polished shoes sat neatly beside the bed. His laptop rested on the desk, the silver lid closed. I did not touch it this time. Instead, I took my own phone from my cardigan pocket, opened the camera, and began to take pictures. The contract for the condo was in an open folder on the desk, a neat stack of paper with the logo of Astral Residences at the top. I photographed each page, making sure the amounts and dates were clear. In a drawer, I found printed receipts, electronics, furniture, restaurants, the headphones, the watch. I laid them out on the bed and moved my phone over them slowly, click after click. I took pictures of the clothing labels, of the shoes, of the watch itself in the little box it had come in, cushioned still under the band. Every image felt like a thin brick on a wall I was stacking between myself and the question, is this really happening? When I had what I thought was enough, I gathered the receipts, put them back where I had found them, and left the room. At the small coffee shop near the bank, Naomi spread the printed photos from my phone across a table. The smell of espresso and baked muffins wrapped around us, a dark, warm contrast to the cold blue of the bank screens. "These are good," she said. "Clear. Dates, amounts, vendors. They show a pattern." She slid a document toward me. "This is the affidavit," she said. "It outlines the facts as you have described them. You are stating under oath that these things are true to the best of your knowledge. The police report will be based on this." I read it paragraph by paragraph. The sentences took my story and turned it into something dry and precise. I, Helen Carter, do state that I had never liked legal language. It felt too far removed from the texture of real life. Here, though, it pressed events into lines that could not be wiggled away from. When I reached the bottom, there was a blank space waiting. "Will they arrest him?" I asked. "That will be up to them," Naomi said. "And up to you. Filing this does not force you to push for prosecution. It gives you a record. It creates a trail. It gives you leverage." The pen felt heavier than the one at the bank. I signed. Naomi smiled, but it was a sad kind of smile. "You are doing a hard thing," she said. "That does not make it the wrong thing." I did not answer. I folded my hands in my lap and stared at the black ink of my name until it stopped swimming. The next morning, Eric came down the stairs in the dark gray suit he had bought with my money. A tie I had not seen before lay smooth against his shirt. He had shaved. His hair was combed. "Big interview today," he said, popping a piece of toast into his mouth. "Wish me luck." He smelled like expensive clone Sharp and layered. "Good luck," I said. He flashed me a quick grin. "Do not wait up," he said. "Might grab a drink with the team after." He grabbed his keys from the hook his laptop bag from the chair and left. The door shut behind him with a solid click. I watched from the front window as his truck pulled out of the driveway and turned onto Willow Lane. It disappeared behind the bend. I gave it 10 minutes. I watched the clock in the hall count them out. Each tick was a step. Then I went upstairs with 5 black trash bags and 3 cardboard boxes. I had found the bags under the sink the night before behind the cleaners. The boxes came from the garage. Robert had always kept old boxes just in case. It felt right to use them now. In Eric's room, I opened the closet and dragged everything that had been bought in the last few months into the center of the floor. The suits, the shirts, the new coat, the shoes. I folded them as neatly as I could and stacked them in boxes. The electronics I wrapped in his own t-shirts for padding and slid into bags. The headphone case clicked shut. The gaming console cable coiled like a snake. Each item I picked up, I matched to an image in my mind from his laptop or from the receipts. I did not touch anything that had been in his life before he moved back in. Old jeans, a worn hoodie, photos. By the time I was done, the room looked strangely bare. Not empty, but closer to the neutral guest room it had been before he came home. I hauled the bags and boxes down the stairs one at a time. My knees protested. My hands burned against the rough plastic. I stopped twice to catch my breath, one hand on the banister, feeling my heart thud against my ribs. On the front porch, I lined them up beside the door. 5 black bags, 3 taped boxes. The morning light made the garbage bags shine. From the street, it probably looked like I was cleaning out a basement, throwing out old clutter. In a way, I was. Inside, I wiped my palms on my cardigan and went to the kitchen. I made tea, not coffee. The kettle whistled full of steam. Then I went to the porch swing. The chains creaked as I sat down. The cushion had taken my shape over the years. The wool blanket lay folded beside me. I did not pick it up. The grandfather clock chimed 4 times before I heard his truck. Gravel crunched, an engine cut off, a car door slammed. There was a pause. "Mom," he called, "why are there trash bags on the porch?" I did not answer. The front door opened. I heard the sound of his shoes on the hardwood, then the quick tempo of his footsteps taking the stairs 2 at a time. "Helen," he shouted, "what is this? Where is my—" His voice cut off. The silence that followed felt as thick as the fog that sometimes rolled in from the sound and swallowed the town. Then the scream. It was the same one that had shaken the walls that first night, full of rage and disbelief. "What did you do?" he roared. "Where are my things?" His steps pounded back down the stairs. He appeared in the doorway to the porch, face-flushed, eyes wide. "What do you think you are doing?" he demanded. "Where is my laptop, my clothes, my watch? Where is my stuff?" I stood up. "You mean my stuff?" I said. My voice sounded steady in my own ears. "Everything I paid for is in those bags and boxes. You can take them when you leave." "You have lost your mind," he said. "This is crazy. You cannot just throw my property out like trash." He took a step toward me. I took one back into the doorway of the living room. On the coffee table, arranged in a neat fan, were the printed photographs Naomi had made from the images on my phone. Condo contracts, receipts, bank pages. I had spread them out before I went to the porch. I picked up the stack and tossed it toward him. The papers flew, some landing at his feet, some on the boards of the porch, some against the railing. "You mean like this property?" I asked. "Or this?" He looked down. On the top page, a logo for Astral Residences stared up from the paper. Underneath it, in black and white, were his name and the words, "Initial payment received." Color drained from his face. "How did you get this?" he whispered. "The same way you got my money," I said, without asking. He swore under his breath and bent to grab the papers. His hands shook as he scanned the pages, flipping one over after another. "I have revoked the power of attorney," I said. "You no longer have access to my accounts. My pension goes into a new bank now. So do my savings." He straightened slowly. "You cannot do that," he said. "You signed that paper. We went to the bank together. You gave me the right." "And now I have taken it back," I said. "Miss Rodriguez notarized it herself." He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "This is insane," he said. "You do not know what you are doing. You are letting some lawyer scare you. You are confused. You have been confused for months. You left the stove on. You left the door open. You cannot even manage your own glasses, and now you think you can manage bank transfers. They are using you. I let him talk. Each word slid past me, familiar lines from a script I no longer felt obligated to believe. When he ran out of breath, I held up the last document. And this, I said, is the report I filed about it. His eyes locked on the heading, City of Maple Ridge Police Department, Financial Exploitation of a Vulnerable Adult. I signed an affidavit, I said. Naomi took it to them yesterday. They know your name now. They know the dates. They know the amounts. He stared at the paper as if it might catch fire in my hand. You called the cops, he said slowly. On your own son. You have 48 hours to leave my house, I said. If you do not, they will come and help you. The words sounded like they belonged to someone else, someone older and younger at the same time. Someone who had watched everything she owned slip into other hands and decided that this was as far as it would go. He dropped the papers. They scattered across the porch, some landing half off the edge corners, flapping in the faint breeze. Mom, he said. His voice changed on that word. It cracked down the middle. He took a step forward and then another until he was standing right in front of me, close enough that I could see the bloodshot lines in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said too fast. The words tumbled out, tripping over each other. I messed up, okay. I made some bad choices. I thought I could fix it before you noticed. I am under a lot of stress. You have no idea what it is like out there right now. I will pay it back. Every cent. Just give me some time. He reached for my hands. I did not give them. You stole from me, I said. You lied to me. You made me doubt my own mind. You told my friends I was confused. You told me I could not be trusted with my own keys. I was trying to protect you, he said. You cannot see that now, but you will. You were protecting your lifestyle, I said, not me. He sank down suddenly, dropping to his knees on the wooden boards. His hands came up to cover his face for a moment, then lowered again. Please, he whispered. Tears streaked the sides of his nose, but his eyes were sharp behind them. You are all I have. Am I asked. He blinked. I thought of the condo, of the rooftop pool, of the receipts for dinners that cost more than my weekly groceries, of the way he had told Marianne I was not well without asking if I was. You stopped being my son, I said, when you started treating me like a problem to manage instead of a person. He flinched as if I had struck him. I stepped past him into the house. In the hallway, the grandfather clock ticked steadily, its pendulum swinging in a measured arc. The door of the birdcage in the kitchen still hung open. I went to the front door and put my hand on the deadbolt. The metal was cool under my fingers. I turned it. The lock slid into place with a clean, solid sound that moved through the frame of the house and into my bones. He did not leave that day. After I turned the deadbolt, I walked into the kitchen and filled the kettle. My hands shook a little as I set it on the stove, but I did not turn the gas too high. The flame held steady in a neat blue circle. Outside on the porch, I could hear Eric moving. The boards creaked. Once he hit the door with the side of his fist. Mom, he called. You cannot lock me out of my own house. It is not your house, I said loud enough for the wood to carry the words. There was a scrape, the sound of papers being gathered, the muffled thud of something kicked. After that, silence. When I checked a few minutes later through the side window, he was gone. The boxes and bags were still lined up on the porch like a row of waiting passengers. He came back that night. Headlights swept across the front of the house, throwing long shadows from the bird bath and the maple tree. The truck door slammed. For a moment, I thought he would try his key. Then I remembered I had changed the lock the week before. The doorknob rattled. Metal clicked against metal with no give. What are you doing? He yelled. You are being ridiculous. Open the door. I sat on the couch, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and listened. You got what you wanted, he shouted. You humiliated me. You talked to the cops. You took your precious money back. You win. Can we be done with this now? My fingers tightened on the ceramic. He kept at it for a while. There were long stretches of muttering, sharp bursts of anger, brief attempts at pleading. He moved between the door and the window, his shadow crossing the curtains, then disappearing. After a while, the front porch went quiet. When I looked again, he was loading the bags and boxes into the back of his truck. He moved more slowly now. There was no yelling, just the dull sound of weight hitting metal. He did not look back at the house before he drove away. The next morning, the porch was empty except for a few stray scraps of paper that had blown into the corner. I picked them up. One was the corner of a receipt for the headphones. The other was the bottom half of a page that still showed the logo of Astral Residences. I crumpled them and dropped them into the trash. A week later, I sat in Ms. Kaplan's office again. This time I noticed the painting on the wall behind her. It was of a bridge over water done in muted colors. I had sat in front of it before and never really seen it. Robert left something in my keeping, she said, opening a drawer. She took out a cream-colored envelope and turned it over in her hands once before passing it across the desk. My name was written on the front in Robert's hand. He had always written like an engineer, even in grocery lists, each letter upright and precise. He instructed me to give it to you if certain conditions were met, she said. I think we can safely say they have. My fingers did not want to break the seal. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Inside was a single sheet folded in thirds. My dear Helen, it began. If you are reading this, then I am gone and something I feared has happened. He wrote about finding Eric in his study during Eric's second year of college, the desk drawer open, the cash box missing $5,000. He wrote about calling the bank and finding charges he had not made on a shared card. He described Eric's face when confronted the easy denial, the way his eyes had held no shame. I realized then Robert wrote that if left unchecked, he would take from you. Not from me. From you. Because you were the one who trusted him. Because you would always choose believing the best over protecting yourself. He wrote that this was why he had insisted on handling the finances. Not only because he liked control, though he admitted that part, with a rare flick of humor, but because he was afraid of what would happen if Eric had full access to my accounts while I was still alive. I know you have felt caged, he wrote. That was never my intent. I only wanted to stand between you and the worst of what our son might become. I apologize for the years I did not teach you how to do what I did. That was my failing, not yours. He went on to explain that he had met with Daniel Sullivan 2 years before his illness, that the retainer had been paid for 5 years of potential work, that he had given Daniel instructions to prioritize my protection over any attempt Eric might make to gain control. You are stronger than you think, he wrote. I hope when I am no longer there to block your way, you will step into a life that belongs to you. He signed it simply. Love, Robert. I read the letter twice. By the third time, the words blurred. I did not cry for him. I had done that already in odd, unexpected bursts over dishes and in the middle of the night. I did not cry for Eric. I had tried to do that and found the tears would not come. I cried for the woman who had spent decades believing that needing help made her weak. For the Sunday evenings she had spent in the living room pretending not to hear the sound of the calculator in the study. For the mornings she had felt guilty for feeling light when her husband was no longer there to fill every room with his habits. When I was done, I folded the letter along its old creases and slipped it back into the envelope. The paper was a little softer now from the moisture of my hands. Thank you, I said to Miss Kaplan. She nodded. Daniel's a good man, she said. You are in capable hands with him. I know, I said. Spring came slowly that year. In March, the days began to stretch at the edges. The light lasted a little longer in the evenings, holding onto the branches of the maples outside my window. The rain shifted from cold sheets to softer, warmer showers. Inside the house, small changes accumulated. I painted the living room walls a warm cream instead of the chilly beige Robert had chosen. I took down the heavy drapes and replaced them with lighter curtains that let the afternoon sun through. I moved his recliner to the garage and put a smaller armchair in its place, one that fit my frame. The birdcage came down from its hook above the kitchen sink. I had to stand on a chair to reach it. Dust puffed into the air when I lifted it free. For a moment I held it in both hands. The brass was tarnished. The little door swung on its hinge open and creaking. I cleaned it, wiping the bars until they shone. Then I hung it on the front porch beside the swing where the light could catch on it in the evenings. I did not put anything inside. The grandfather clock stayed where it was in the hall. One Sunday, out of habit, I reached into the cabinet where Robert had kept the winding key. It lay in the same small dish beside a handful of paper clips and an old button. I took it out and opened the panel on the front of the clock. The weights had sunk almost to the bottom of their chains. The pendulum still swung, but I could hear a small hesitation at the top of each arc, as if it were considering stopping. I slipped the key into the slot and turned. The weights rose. The tick grew stronger. I can do this, I told the empty hallway. In late April, I put a small sign in the front window. Room for rent. Quiet house close to bus. In my neatest print, I added the phone number at the bottom. A few people answered the sign. A man who smelled like stale beer and spoke too loudly. A woman who wanted to bring 2 large dogs. A young couple who needed a place just for a month while they closed on their new condo. Then Zoe came. She stood on the porch with a canvas bag slung over one shoulder and a portfolio case in her hand. Her hair was pulled back into a low bun, loose strands hanging around her face. She wore a paint-stained sweatshirt and clean sneakers. Hi, she said. I am Zoe Miller. I texted you about the room. Her smile was open but not careless. I showed her the guest room, the bed, the dresser, the window that looked out over the backyard and the neighbor's cherry tree. It is just me in the house, I said. I like things quiet, no parties, no smoking, rent due on the 1st. We share the kitchen. That sounds perfect, she said. I am in my studio most days anyway. I just need a place to sleep and make noodles. She pulled a crumpled envelope from her bag. I can pay first month and a deposit now, she said. If you decide you do not want me, I totally understand. I know renting to someone you do not know is a big deal. I looked at the envelope, at the way she had assumed I still had the power to decide. You can move in on Saturday, I said. She did. In the weeks that followed, the house acquired new sounds. The soft thump of Zoe's feet on the stairs. Music from her room at a low volume, mostly piano and voices I did not recognize. Pots clinking in the kitchen when she came home late and made herself something to eat. Sometimes on the mornings she did not have class, I would come into the kitchen and find a small watercolor propped against the sugar jar, a lemon on a plate, the view from the kitchen window, the old bird cage on the porch. Once there was a painting of a bird. Not a canary like the one I used to have, but a small sparrow mid-flight, wings open, leaving the edge of a square frame that suggested a window. I am still working on the feathers, she said when I asked her about it. Birds are harder than they look. It is lovely, I said. In early June, Marianne came over with a glossy brochure for an Alaskan cruise. She unfolded it on the dining table, smoothing the pages with the flat of her hand. 7 days from Seattle, she said. Glaciers, whales, the whole postcard package. I have wanted to do something like this since we watched that nature documentary in the staff room. I remember I said, you said the water looked like glass. It still does, she said. And you still have not seen it in person. What if we fix that? The old fear rose first. It was an automatic thing like a reflex. The idea of booking a ticket online, of putting my card number into a little box on a screen, made my stomach tighten. I looked at the computer on the sideboard. I do not know how to do all that I said. She lifted an eyebrow. You sat in that chair yesterday and paid your electric bill online, she said. I watched you. You navigated 3 menus without help. You can book a vacation. We did it together. I typed the web address into the browser. I chose dates, clicked on a picture of a room that looked comfortable. Marianne read the fine print over my shoulder, humming under her breath when something pleased her. When it came time to pay, I took my debit card out of my wallet and entered the numbers into the form. My fingers shook only once. The confirmation page bloomed on the screen in blue and white. Look at that, Marianne said. You just bought yourself a view of the inside passage. It felt less like buying and more like opening a door. The text from Eric came 3 days before we were due to leave. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a list of things to pack when my phone buzzed. The number was not in my contacts, but the area code was local. Mom, the message said, it is me. My throat tightened. I read on. I am working at a car wash now. Lost the condo. Things went south with the job. I am trying to get back on my feet. I know you are mad. I know I messed up. Could you please help me out with $500 just this once so I can cover rent? I swear I will pay you back. The words were familiar. The amounts had changed. The pattern had not. I stared at the small gray bubbles on the screen for a long time. Long enough that the phone dimmed and I had to tap it awake again. Memories came one after another, overlapping. Eric on the porch with his suitcases. Eric at the kitchen table, his hand warm on my shoulder while he talked about keeping me safe. Eric on his knees on the boards outside the front door, tears on his face and calculation still in his eyes. I waited for guilt. It did not arrive on cue. What I felt instead was a soft, persistent ache for the boy he had been long before bills and credit and condos, for the chance he had been given and what he had done with it. I typed and erased 3 different responses. In the end, I did not send any of them. I held down the number and pressed the option that blocked it. The gray bubbles vanished. The screen returned to my list. On the morning we left for the cruise, the sky over Maple Ridge was clear. Zoe carried my suitcase down the stairs for me and set it by the door. Text me when you are on the boat, she said. I want to see the view. I will, I said. Marianne pulled into the driveway, honking once in a quick, cheerful burst. She climbed out of the driver's seat, wearing a navy windbreaker and sunglasses pushed up into her hair. Are you ready? She called. Yes, I said. I took one last look around the front room, the cream-colored walls, the smaller armchair, the empty space where the recliner had been. Sunlight lay in a square on the floor. On the porch, the birdcage hung to the left of the swing. Its bars caught the light. Its door was as open as ever. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The new lock turned smoothly under my hand. The bolt slid into place with the same sound it had made the day I first used it in anger. It sounded different now because I did. This time, the locked door did not mean someone else had control. It meant the house would be here when I came back. It meant the rooms inside belonged to me. I slipped the keys into my pocket. As we pulled away from the curb, I glanced back through the car window. The porch swing moved slightly in the morning breeze empty. The bird cage beside it hung still, its open door facing the street. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.